I was only gone for 12 minutes. 12 minutes to get coffee from the hospital cafeteria while my 8-year-old daughter Melody recovered from surgery. When I walked back into that room, I heard my own mother's voice saying words that made my blood freeze. "Your mom doesn't really love you, sweetheart. That's why you're always sick." My daughter was sobbing, her small shoulders shaking as she asked me through tears if Grandma was telling the truth. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. But what I did next made my mother's bank account freeze by morning and changed our family forever. My name is Francine, and I'm about to tell you how a simple coffee run exposed 15 years of family secrets and financial fraud that nobody saw coming. I'm a pediatric nurse who spent my entire career caring for sick children, but I never imagined I'd have to protect my own daughter from the person who was supposed to love her unconditionally, her grandmother. This is the story of my daughter Melody, the bravest 8-year-old who had just come through her 3rd kidney surgery. The story of my mother Beatrice, a retired bank teller who wielded emotional manipulation like a weapon. The story of my father Roland, a quiet contractor who finally found his voice after 40 years of silence. And the story of how sometimes the most dangerous threats to our children come from inside our own families. What my mother didn't know that day was that the hospital room had a recording device. What she didn't know was that her estranged sister had been building a fraud case against her for 15 years. And what she certainly didn't know was that she had just crossed a line that would cost her everything: her financial freedom, her reputation, and her access to the granddaughter she claimed to love. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that morning, to the surgical waiting room where my mother sat like a queen holding court, making comments about my failures as a parent while my baby girl was being cut open down the hall. Let me tell you about the 12 minutes that revealed the truth about 3 generations of toxic motherhood and how I finally found the strength to break the cycle. Because this isn't just about a grandmother's cruel words to a sick child. This is about the moment I realized that my daughter's chronic illness might have been made worse by the chronic toxicity of someone we trusted. This is about discovering that the same woman who convinced me I was broken as a child was now trying to break my daughter. And this is about the decision that every parent eventually faces. Do you keep the peace or do you protect your child? I chose my child, and my mother's bank account wasn't the only thing that froze that morning. So did 40 years of manipulation, 15 years of financial crimes, and a lifetime of believing that family means accepting abuse. The coffee cost me $4.50. The truth it revealed was priceless, and the freedom it brought my daughter was worth more than the $150,000 my mother would eventually be forced to pay back to the family she robbed. This is our story. The morning of Melody's surgery started at 4 a.m. with her small hand shaking me awake. She didn't say anything at first, just climbed into my bed and pressed her face against my shoulder. I could feel her tears soaking through my nightshirt, and I knew she was scared. This was her 3rd surgery in 2 years, but knowing what to expect somehow made it worse, not better. "Mama, what if something goes wrong this time?" she whispered into the darkness. I pulled her closer, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "Remember what Dr. Harrison said? This surgery is going to make things so much better. No more pain when you eat. No more missing school because your tummy hurts. This is the last big one, baby. Promise?" "I promise we're going to do everything we can to make you feel better." By 5 a.m., we were both dressed and ready. Melody insisted on wearing her lucky purple socks, the ones with little unicorns that her best friend Sage had given her. I braided her long brown hair the way she liked it, tight enough to stay neat but loose enough not to give her a headache. She clutched Mr. Peanuts, her stuffed elephant, like her life depended on it. "Mr. Peanuts is brave," she announced as I packed our hospital bag. "He told me he's not scared at all." "Mr. Peanuts is very brave," I agreed, tucking in her iPad, charger, favorite blanket, and the get well cards her class had made. "Just like you." The drive to Children's Medical Center took 20 minutes. Melody was quiet in the back seat, watching the sun slowly paint the sky pink and orange. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, memorizing her face, the way mothers do when they're terrified but can't show it. Check-in was smooth. The nurses knew us by now. 3 surgeries in 2 years make you a familiar face, whether you want to be or not. Brenda, my colleague from the fourth floor, stopped by to give Melody a new coloring book. "For when you wake up," Brenda said, winking. "I heard you're an artist." Melody managed a small smile. "I drew a picture of my kidney. Mama says it looks like a bean, but I think it looks like a baby dinosaur." We were settling into the pre-op room when I heard my mother's voice cutting through the morning calm like a rusty blade. "Francine, this hospital's parking is absolutely criminal. $20 just to visit my sick granddaughter." Beatrice swept into the room wearing her typical outfit, pressed beige pantsuit, pearl necklace, and an expression that suggested the entire world existed solely to inconvenience her. My father, Roland, shuffled in behind her, carrying her purse and looking apologetic. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad." I stood to hug them both, though my mother's embrace felt like being briefly trapped by a mannequin. "Hello, sunshine," my father said to Melody, his weathered face creasing into a genuine smile. "How's my brave girl?" "Hi, Grandpa. Did you bring me a rock?" Roland had been bringing Melody rocks from his construction sites for years. She had a whole collection at home, each one labeled with where it came from and when. He pulled a smooth gray stone from his pocket. "This one's from the new library they're building. Thought you might like to hold on to it during the surgery. For luck." My mother scoffed. "Roland, she can't take a dirty rock into surgery. Honestly." "It's not dirty. I washed it," he said quietly, but he was already retreating, the way he always did when Beatrice used that tone. "The surgery's at 8, I said, trying to redirect. "They'll take her back in about an hour." "Another surgery," my mother sighed dramatically, settling into the visitor's chair. "You know, Francine, when you were young, you had terrible asthma, but we never needed all these surgeries. I sometimes wonder if doctors today just like to cut children open for profit." "Mom, please. Not today." "I'm just saying, maybe if you got a second opinion from that specialist I mentioned, the one from my church group whose son is supposedly brilliant." "Beatrice," my father warned gently. "What? I'm trying to help. Someone needs to ask the hard questions. Francine's too emotional to think clearly. That's always been her problem. Too soft, too quick to coddle." I focused on Melody, helped her into the hospital gown, made sure Mr. Peanuts was positioned just right in her arms. The anesthesiologist came by to explain the process, and Melody asked her usual questions about whether she'd dream while she was asleep. "Some people do," Dr. Kwan said kindly. "What would you like to dream about?" "Swimming with dolphins," Melody said immediately, "in water that doesn't hurt my tummy." My mother muttered something about unrealistic expectations, but I ignored her. I'd gotten good at that over the years. What I hadn't gotten good at was protecting Melody from her grandmother's subtle poison. That failure would haunt me in exactly 3 hours and 47 minutes when I'd return from my coffee run to find my mother destroying my daughter's trust in the one person who loved her most. But in that pre-op room, I just held my daughter's hand and promised her I'd be there when she woke up. The surgery took 4 hours. 4 hours of sitting in uncomfortable waiting room chairs, drinking terrible vending machine coffee, and deflecting my mother's running commentary about everything I'd done wrong in raising Melody. According to Beatrice, I fed her the wrong foods, chose the wrong doctors, and worst of all, I was raising her without a father figure. "A girl needs stability," she said for perhaps the 100th time since Melody's diagnosis. "Children from broken homes are always sicker. It's proven science." "Francine's doing an amazing job," my father interjected, but his voice was barely above a whisper. "Roland, don't enable her. Someone needs to tell her the truth." The truth. My mother's version of truth was a twisted thing, shaped to cut where it hurt most. But I was too exhausted to argue, too focused on the clock, counting down minutes until I could see my baby again. When Dr. Harrison finally emerged at 12:15 p.m., still in her surgical scrubs, I jumped to my feet so fast I knocked over my coffee cup. "Everything went perfectly," she said, and I nearly collapsed with relief. "We were able to repair the blockage completely. Her kidney function should improve dramatically once she heals. She's in recovery now, just starting to wake up." "Can I see her?" "Of course. Room 308. She'll be groggy, but she's asking for you." I practically ran to the elevator, my parents trailing behind. When I reached Melody's room, she looked so small in the hospital bed, her face pale against the white pillows. but her eyes fluttered open when she heard my voice. "Mama?" "I'm here, baby. You did so good. The doctor said everything went perfect." She gave me a weak smile, then closed her eyes again. The nurse adjusting her IV looked up at me with kind eyes. "She'll be in and out for a while. The anesthesia takes time to wear off completely." My mother surveyed the room with her critical eye. "These rooms are smaller than last time. And why is there no chair for Roland? Really, for what they charge, you'd think they could provide adequate seating." I'd been awake for over 8 hours. The adrenaline crash was hitting hard, and I realized I hadn't eaten anything since dinner the night before. My stomach was cramping and my head was starting to pound. "I'll sit with her," my mother announced, settling into the recliner next to Melody's bed like it was her throne. "You need to eat something, Francine. You're no good to her if you pass out. Your color is terrible." I hesitated. Every maternal instinct screamed at me to stay, but I was genuinely feeling lightheaded. The room spun slightly when I stood too quickly. "Go," my father said gently. "We'll be right here, both of us." "Just to the cafeteria," I said. 15 minutes maximum." "Take your time," my mother said, already pulling out her reading glasses and her phone. "I raised 2 children. I think I can handle sitting with my granddaughter for a few minutes." I kissed Melody's forehead. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. "I'll be right back, sweetheart," I whispered. The walk to the hospital cafeteria took exactly 6 minutes. I know because I checked my phone obsessively, unable to shake the feeling that I shouldn't leave. The lunch crowd had cleared out, so the lines were mercifully short. I grabbed a pre-made sandwich that looked edible, a bottle of water, and a large coffee. The cashier, a teenage girl with bright pink hair, smiled sympathetically. "Long day? My daughter just had surgery." "She's in good hands here. My brother had his appendix out last year. The nurses are amazing." I managed a smile and headed back, walking faster as I approached the pediatric ward. That's when I heard it. My mother's voice floating through the partially open door of room 308, low and insistent, the tone she used when she thought no one important was listening. "You need to understand something, Melody. Your mother acts like she loves you. But if she really did, would you be sick all the time? Think about it, sweetheart. Real mothers protect their children. Real mothers don't let them suffer like this." I froze in the hallway, my coffee cup trembling in my hand. Through the crack in the door, I could see my father standing in the corner, his face pale, his hands clenched at his sides. Melody's weak voice responded, "But Mama takes care of me. She stays up with me when I hurt." "That's guilt, sweetheart, not love. She feels guilty because deep down she knows she's the reason you're sick. Some mothers just aren't meant to have children. Their bodies make broken babies. Your mother was sick too when she was little. Weak lungs, weak constitution, and now you have weak kidneys. Do you see the pattern?" The sound that came from my daughter then was like nothing I'd ever heard. A broken, confused sob that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. The coffee cup slipped from my hand, hitting the floor with a crash that announced my presence. I pushed open the door to find Melody crying, her heart monitor beeping faster, her small hands clutching the blanket. "Mama." Her eyes found mine, red and swollen, filled with a confusion that broke my heart. "Grandma says you don't really love me. She says that's why I'm always sick. Is it true? Did I come out wrong because you didn't want me?" The room went silent except for the steady beep of machines and Melody's ragged breathing. My mother stood up slowly, smoothing her pantsuit, not even attempting to look ashamed. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to rage, to grab my mother by her pearl necklace and physically drag her from the room, to scream every thought I'd suppressed for 34 years. But I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, brave daughter who had just come through surgery, her face still puffy from anesthesia, tears streaming down her cheeks, and I knew she didn't need to witness more trauma. I set down what was left of my coffee very carefully on the side table. My movements were deliberate, controlled. I walked to Melody's bed and took her small hand in both of mine. "Baby, look at me," I said, my voice steady despite the fury burning in my chest like acid. "Look right at Mama's eyes." She turned to me, hiccuping through her tears. "I loved you before you were born. I loved you the first time I felt you kick. I loved you through every surgery, every sick day, every moment. And you know how I used to sing to you when you were in my belly?" She nodded slightly. That's because I couldn't wait to meet you. And when you were born, the nurse put you on my chest and you grabbed my finger with your tiny hand, and I knew you were the most perfect thing I'd ever seen. Your illness has nothing to do with love. It's just something that happened, like how some people need glasses or have freckles. You're not broken, sweetheart. You're perfect exactly as you are. But Grandma said you made me sick because your body was broken too. I felt my father shift in the corner, heard him clear his throat like he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Grandma is wrong, I said simply, and she's going to leave now. My mother huffed, already gathering her purse with sharp, irritated movements. Francine, you're being dramatic. I was simply preparing the child for reality. Someone needs to tell her the truth about life. Get out, I said quietly, still not looking at her, keeping my eyes on Melody's face. Excuse me. Get out of this room, get out of this hospital, and don't come back. This is ridiculous. I'm trying to help. You've always been too sensitive. This is exactly what I mean about being too emotional to make good decisions. I stood up then, turning to face her fully. You just told an 8-year-old child 3 hours out of surgery that her mother doesn't love her. You told her she's sick because I'm broken. What exactly were you helping? Someone needs to prepare her for disappointment. Life isn't a fairy tale, Francine. No, it's not. Which is why she doesn't need her own grandmother adding to her pain. Roland, she snapped at my father. We're leaving. Get my coat. But my father, for the first time in my entire life, didn't move. He stood there in the corner, his construction-weathered hands trembling, his face flushed with something I'd never seen before. No, Beatrice. She turned to him, shocked. What did you say? I said no, you're leaving. I'm staying with my granddaughter. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not being ridiculous. I'm being a grandfather and a father. Finally. My mother's face went through several shades of red before settling on a purple that matched her lipstick. Fine, you can find your own way home then. She stormed out, her heels clicking against the hospital tile like angry little hammers. The door slammed behind her and suddenly the room felt like it could breathe again. I turned back to Melody, whose eyes were wide with surprise. In all her 8 years, she'd never seen anyone stand up to Grandma Beatrice. Grandpa's staying? She whispered. If that's okay with you, Sunshine, Roland said, moving closer to her bed. I'd like to stay. She nodded, then looked back at me. Mama, why would Grandma say those things? I sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to disturb her IV line. Sometimes, baby, people who are hurting inside say hurtful things to others. It doesn't make it okay, and it doesn't make what they say true. Is Grandma hurting inside? I glanced at my father, who nodded slightly. I think she might be, I said carefully. But that's not your problem to fix. Your only job is to get better and know that you are completely, absolutely, 100% loved. That evening, after Melody had fallen asleep, I stepped into the hallway with my father. He looked older than his 60 years, defeated in a way that broke my heart. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking. I should have stopped her. I should have stopped her years ago. Dad, how long has she been saying things like this to Melody? He rubbed his face with both hands. Little comments here and there when you weren't around. I thought they were harmless. I told myself she didn't mean it. But Francine, there's something else. Something I should have told you years ago. I waited, watching him struggle with words that had been buried for decades. Your asthma when you were young. She convinced you it was because something was wrong with you, didn't she? I nodded, remembering years of feeling defective, broken, like my body had betrayed not just me, but my mother, too. She did the same thing to you that she just did to Melody, and I let her. God help me, I let her. That night, I made 3 phone calls from the family lounge while my father sat with Melody. Each call set in motion events that would change everything. The first was to my lawyer cousin, Theodora. The second was to someone I hadn't spoken to in 15 years, my mother's estranged sister, Aunt Geraldine. The third was to document everything with hospital security and the charge nurse, because I knew this was far from over. The next morning, my mother discovered her bank account was frozen. Not by me. I didn't have that power. But Aunt Geraldine did. The call I'd made to her the night before had set off a chain of events 15 years in the making. My phone rang at 7 a.m. Beatrice's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately, then again. On the fourth call, I stepped out of Melody's room and answered. "What did you do?" she shrieked without preamble. "My accounts are frozen, all of them. The bank says there's an investigation for fraud." "I didn't do anything to your accounts, Mother." "Don't lie to me. This is about yesterday. You're trying to punish me for telling the truth." "No, Beatrice," a familiar voice said behind me. I turned to see Aunt Geraldine walking down the hospital corridor, looking exactly as I remembered her, tall, silver-haired, and radiating the kind of quiet strength my mother never possessed. This is about 15 years of theft. I hadn't seen Geraldine since my grandmother's funeral. She'd left immediately after the service, and my mother had told everyone it was because she was unstable, selfish, couldn't handle grief properly. But the woman standing before me looked anything but unstable. "Francine, may I?" She gestured to my phone. I handed it over, still in shock. "Beatrice, this is Geraldine. The accounts are frozen because I finally provided the bank with evidence that you've been stealing from Mother's Trust for 15 years. Even through the phone, I could hear my mother's sharp intake of breath. "The inheritance was supposed to be split equally," Geraldine continued calmly, $300,000 each. "But you convinced Mother I was unstable during her final days when dementia had taken hold. You had her change the will, but you forgot about the joint accounts she'd set up years before, accounts you've been illegally accessing ever since." "You can't prove anything." "Actually, I can. 15 years of bank statements, forged signatures, and unauthorized withdrawals. I've had a forensic accountant tracking every penny. I never acted on it because I didn't want to hurt Francine and Roland. But when Francine called me last night sobbing about what you did to that precious little girl, I knew it was time." My mother hung up. Geraldine handed me back my phone with a sad smile. "How did you know to document everything?" I asked. "Because she did the same thing to me when we were children. Convinced our parents I was troubled, difficult, unlovable. I spent years in therapy undoing that damage. When I heard she had a granddaughter, I started watching, waiting, hoping she'd changed. But people like Beatrice don't change. They just find new victims." We sat in the family lounge while Geraldine explained everything. The investigation would likely result in criminal charges. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. My mother had stolen approximately $150,000 over 15 years, thinking she was too smart to get caught. "But that's not the worst part," Geraldine said, pulling out a folder. "I hired a private investigator 5 years ago. Did you know your mother was telling people at her church that Melody's illness was God's punishment for you being a single mother?" My stomach turned. "What?" "She's been building a narrative for years. Poor Beatrice, suffering with a disappointing daughter and sick grandchild. She's collected thousands in prayer donations from well-meaning church members who thought they were helping with medical bills. But I've never taken a penny from her for Melody's care." "Exactly. That money went straight into her personal account." My father appeared in the doorway looking haggard. He'd stayed with Melody all night while I'd tried to process everything. "Roland," Geraldine said gently, "I'm sorry you're finding out this way." He sat down heavily. "I knew about the church donations. I tried to make her stop. She said it was voluntary, that people wanted to help." "Did you know what she was saying about Francine and Melody?" His silence was answer enough. "There's more," Geraldine continued. "Francine, your asthma as a child. Do you remember getting worse whenever Beatrice gave you that special tea she made?" A memory surfaced, sharp and sudden. The bitter tea my mother insisted would help my breathing. How I always felt worse after drinking it, but she said it was the toxins leaving my body. "She was putting eucalyptus oil in it," Geraldine said quietly. "Eucalyptus oil can trigger severe asthma attacks when ingested. I found her diary from that time. She wrote about how your illness brought her attention, sympathy, made her feel needed." The room spun. My father made a choking sound. "She made Francine sick on purpose?" he gasped. "Not to kill her, just enough to keep her weak, dependent. When Francine grew up and became independent anyway, Beatrice needed a new project. Enter Melody. Are you saying she hurt my daughter? Not physically, but emotional stress absolutely impacts physical healing. There's a reason Melody's recoveries have been harder when Beatrice was around. The body can't heal properly when it's under constant psychological attack. 3 weeks later, the investigation concluded. Beatrice was arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and theft. The local newspaper ran the story. Local woman charged with stealing inheritance, church donations. Her carefully constructed reputation crumbled overnight. She was ultimately forced to pay full restitution to Geraldine plus interest, totaling nearly $200,000. She avoided jail time through a plea deal that included 5 years of financial probation and 500 hours of community service. The church banned her from the property after learning she'd been collecting money under false pretenses. But the real resolution came the day Melody looked at me and said, "Mama, I feel better without Grandma Beatrice around. Is that bad?" "No, baby," I told her, holding her close. "That's your heart telling you the truth, and the truth is never bad." Beatrice was ultimately forced to pay restitution to Aunt Geraldine, $150,000 plus interest. She avoided jail time but was placed on financial probation for 5 years. The church congregation, horrified to learn they'd been deceived, demanded she return the donations she'd collected under false pretenses. She moved to Florida to live with her sister Patricia, who ironically had always seen through her manipulation but lived too far away to intervene. But the real aftermath wasn't about money or legal victories. It was about what happened in the weeks and months that followed. My father moved into a small apartment near us. For the first time in 40 years, he was free from my mother's constant criticism. He started coming to every one of Melody's medical appointments, learning about her condition, asking questions he'd been too afraid to ask before. He became the grandfather he'd always wanted to be, but had been too paralyzed by fear to become. "Grandpa Roland makes me laugh," Melody told me one evening, 3 weeks after the surgery. "And he doesn't say mean things about you, Mama. He says you're the best mom in the whole hospital, and you work there, so you would know all the other moms." The surgery was a complete success. Melody's kidney function improved dramatically, and within 2 months she was back to being a normal, energetic 8-year-old. She joined the swim team, something she'd never been able to do before. Watching her dive into that pool for the first time, fearless and strong, I cried behind my sunglasses. Dr. Harrison pulled me aside during a follow-up appointment. "I've seen this before," she said quietly. "Toxic stress from family members can absolutely impact a child's recovery and overall health. Their cortisol levels stay elevated, their immune systems weaken, their bodies can't heal properly. Removing that source of stress was medicine just as powerful as any surgery." Aunt Geraldine visited us for Melody's 9th birthday. She brought photo albums I'd never seen, pictures of my grandmother holding me as a baby, looking at me with such pure love that it made me cry right there at the kitchen table. "Your grandmother adored you," Geraldine said, rubbing my back. "Beatrice couldn't stand it. She wanted all the attention for herself, so she created a narrative where you were weak, needed fixing, weren't quite right. She did the same thing to your daughter. But you broke the cycle, Francine. You broke it." 6 months later, I received a letter from my mother. No apology, just accusations and demands to see her granddaughter. I filed it with the others, unopened, in a folder my lawyer advised me to keep. She tried reaching out through mutual friends, through distant relatives, even through social media. Each attempt was met with silence. My father asked me once if I could ever forgive her. "Maybe someday," I told him honestly. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it definitely doesn't mean giving her another chance to hurt Melody. My daughter's safety and well-being come first. Always. "I wish I'd been that strong," he said, tears in his weathered eyes. "I wish I'd protected you the way you're protecting her." "You're here now, Dad. That's what matters." The biggest change came in me. I started therapy to deal with 34 years of manipulation I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I learned that my asthma wasn't my fault, that my daughter's illness wasn't my fault, that my mother's inability to love us properly wasn't my fault either. Melody is 10 now, healthy and thriving. She wants to be a pediatric nurse like me, she says, to help sick kids know they're perfect exactly as they are. When she says this, my father tears up every single time. You broke the chain, he tells me. 3 generations of manipulation and emotional abuse, and you broke it. Last week, Melody asked me why some grandmas are mean. I told her the truth in words she could understand. Sometimes people have hurt inside them that they never fixed, and instead of healing it, they pass it on to others. But we get to choose differently. We get to choose love. She thought about that for a moment, then said, I'm going to be the kind of grandma who bakes cookies and tells kids they're wonderful. I know you will, baby. I didn't scream that day in the hospital. I didn't cause a scene. But I did something far more powerful. I protected my daughter and showed her what real love looks like. Fierce, unwavering, and willing to stand against anyone who would try to dim her light. The coffee I bought that day went cold, untouched, splattered across the hospital floor. But what I gained in those 12 minutes, the clarity to finally see my mother's toxicity for what it was and the courage to end it, that was worth more than all the inheritance money in the world. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't raising your voice. It's raising your standards for who gets access to your child's heart. And sometimes, protecting the next generation means being willing to lose the previous one. That's the real inheritance I'm leaving Melody, the knowledge that she is worthy of love, exactly as she is, and the strength to walk away from anyone who tries to convince her otherwise. She'll never have to question if she's enough because I made sure the voices telling her she wasn't were removed from her life completely. My mother thought she was teaching Melody about reality. Instead, she taught both of us the most valuable lesson of our lives. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up with love instead of poison, who builds you up instead of tearing you down, and who sees your worth even when you're at your weakest. Melody and I are closer than ever. My father is finally the man he always wanted to be. And somewhere in Florida, my mother is probably telling anyone who will listen that she's the victim in all this. But that's no longer our story to carry. We've written a new one, and it's beautiful. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to protect your children from toxic family members, or if you believe that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away, please share this video. Leave a comment below about your own experiences with breaking toxic cycles. Your story might help someone else find their courage. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real, raw stories about the choices parents make to protect their children. Remember, choosing your child over toxic family isn't cruel. It's love in its fiercest form.